Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another live stream. And it's a packed show today, a lot of news to unwrap. Obviously, the latest on Rhys James's injury, the Bournemouth game yesterday, Chelsea's pursuit of Enzo Fernandez, all the latest January transfer news as well, the pursuit of a new right back as well. There is so much to get stuck into. And George, it only seems one place to start, mate. Rhys James. Obviously, picked up that knee injury against Milan, which seems like an eternity ago in the San Siro. Obviously, missed the entire World Cup, which is gutting for him on a personal level. Yes, you know, he's got age on his side and there will be another one, but, you know, you don't know what's going to happen in 4 years' time. There could be the same situation again, but you just never know. So it's always so disappointing for him. He's then worked so hard on his rehab to get back. You know, he played the 50 minutes against Brentford at Cobham in a behind closed doors friendly the week before the Bournemouth game, and then he starts against Bournemouth, and after about 50 odd minutes he suffers a reoccurrence of that same knee injury. Thankfully not as bad, and we'll get into the details of that now. But just before we go into the details and whether he should or shouldn't have started and kind of what's going on, but just how disappointing is it on a personal level for him to have done 8 weeks of rehab, missed the World Cup, and then less than an hour into your comeback the same thing happens again? It must be so tough. And people think, oh, you know, get paid hundreds of thousands of pounds, it doesn't matter. Mate, it doesn't matter. The money is irrelevant. Like, when you dedicate your life to something like he's doing, to suffer another setback like that after having 8 weeks out and missing the World Cup, it's got to be so hard to take.
Yeah, he's got to be gutted, hasn't he? You know, missing the World Cup and being, you know, like you said, footballers, regardless of all the money, they're at the moment he's in his prime. You could argue that he's still got his prime to come, but they've got a very short window in terms of their career, and at the moment he's playing some of the best football he's played. So to be tarnished with so many bad injuries and lengthy injuries that have kept him out playing in such key moments as well. You know, even if you're not going to start in a World Cup, you'd love to be involved in it. He would have certainly been on that plane had he not been injured. He's then managed to recover and get back, and we're back on club duty now. And then, you know, to not even get a full game in, and unfortunately being the same knee, there's nothing worse for a footballer than to be sat on the sidelines watching other people play football. I think it doesn't matter about the money in that case. And obviously he managed to walk off, so that's a positive. And then obviously when Graham Potter mentioned in the news that it's the same knee, it's obviously concerning. But yeah, I am generally gutted for him. And you could see yesterday just the influence he has, even in those 50 minutes. He completely changes the way we play. So he's going to be a huge miss for us.
I mean, we'll come on to that in terms of how reliant we are on him as an individual. But in terms of, you know, Rhys James himself, I mean, I obviously I was at the game yesterday. I was saying kind of in the preview and in the build up and stuff that I personally wouldn't have started him. Graham Potter saying beforehand that you know, we've got to manage his minutes. It's not ideal to build him up in the Premier League. And I just look at it and I just felt, was that a risk worth taking? Should he have been, you know, chucked in at the deep end to start this game against Bournemouth? You know, when you're looking to better player back in from a long-term injury that he's been out for 2 months. I don't know. I just think I personally wouldn't have done it. But let's wait and see. Yeah, mate, I was just saying that personally, in terms of Rhys James starting, you know, he's been out for best part of 2 months, hasn't really played any competitive football at all since the game in the San Siro, which I think now was back in sort of October time. Could have been very start of November, but I think it was October time. You know, played no football since then. As I said, 50 minutes in that behind closed doors friendly at Cobham against Brentford. Potter saying, you know, that's obviously completely different to the step up to what the Premier League's like. And even Potter saying beforehand that, you know, he's got to manage Rhys James's minutes, bed him back in the Premier League's not the ideal place to do that. Having had those comments as well, I was then really surprised to see him start in this game. You know, I always look at, if you're, you know, reintroducing a player after injury, particularly someone that has had a number of injuries in a short period of time, that you would introduce him gradually from the bench and build his minutes up. So he might play 20 minutes from the bench today. He then might play half an hour against Forest. He then might play an hour, and then he might then by the fourth game he might be ready to play 90 minutes. Are you surprised that he was chucked straight back in at the deep end to start? I know hindsight's easy, and you'd be like, oh, he shouldn't have started because he got injured. He could have obviously got injured and he came off the bench. But you talk about managing minutes, and whatever's happened, you'd have to say that this on the face of it, looks like a mismanagement here.
Yeah, I think it was a strange and a poor decision. I think it is important to highlight the hindsight issue because, again, if he ends up playing the whole game, no one bats an eyelid. But it's the fact that he has got injured that's the problem. And we do have adequate cover there. And I think you've also got to look at the opposition and think, Bournemouth, just sitting above that drop zone, they're about 3 or 4 points clear of the bottom 3, but they're not in particularly great form. I know we haven't got a great head-to-head in recent years against Bournemouth. And I suppose Potter, despite everything that's gone on in the World Cup and people have forgotten about our club form, we were sitting in 8th before the game and, had gone on a really bad streak of form. So maybe he wanted to put out his best team possible. I think if your best team's fit and the doctors have cleared it, then as a manager, that there's still a decision to be made. But I think it makes it, I have no doubts that Chelsea have, been given expert advice on what to do with Rhys James and that he was fit to play that game. So I don't blame Potter as such for that. Because he needs the points. We need the points. We need to keep him with that top 4. We need to keep him in the hunt. But yeah, particularly as he's so crucial for us, did he really need to play at home against a bottom half struggling side? It's questionable.
I mean, it is questionable, but then on the flip side as well, you look at it, mate, and you think, well, we lost 4 of our last 5 games before the World Cup. Before we kicked off yesterday, we were down in 9th. Could we have actually afforded to have not played him? I know people say, oh, it's only Bournemouth, he shouldn't have played. But actually, at the moment, mate, there's no easy games anywhere, but particularly for us with the form we're in right now, you can't take any games for granted and think, oh, we can make a few changes here because we'll win. Because the reality of the situation is we're hardly winning any games right now. And so I think, like in the past under Tuchel and like with Kante as well, is that actually because he's so important to this side and results, particularly at Chelsea, are so important as well. And Potter, early in his reign, having suffered a few defeats, that pressure builds if you lose again and you leave Rhys James out of the starting lineup. So do you almost feel like he, like predecessors before him, are almost kind of forced into this situation of actually, shit, he's so important to us. I would like to actually bed him in from the bench, but I actually can't really afford to do that.
No, I completely agree. Potter is completely aware that with the history of managers, he has not got the time to play a second string fiddled side and take points for granted. Yes, you'd probably say in previous years, Chelsea at home to Bournemouth is a banker, regardless of the team we've got out. But I was looking at the table yesterday before we kicked off, and it was quite alarming to me. And the distraction of the World Cup kind of took my thoughts away from it slightly, thinking how difficult this position is for Chelsea just to keep in line with those chasing that top 4 spot, which is absolutely essential for us as a club to go forward. And with the money that we've spent, I think it's imperative that we finish in that top 4 as a minimum requirement. And that is getting away from us, and the games aren't getting any easier. And we had to get 3 points yesterday. So no, I don't blame Potter for it. It's just, with bigger fish to fry, could we have got over the line with Asby playing at right back? I'm still convinced we could, but again, you only have to see the first, couple of 25, 35 minutes of that game and how influential he was.
Oh, yeah.
I know we took our foot off the gas in the second half, but I don't know. Is it a more difficult game when James doesn't start? You'd have to say yes. So obviously, it's a difficult one to take, and you can never foresee injuries. And we've been really unlucky in key areas in the last couple of years, actually, with players getting injured for lengthy spells. And we just hope for a quick recovery, and hopefully this is a lesson learned.
Well, mate, you just on that, you say, oh, we've been unlucky. Yes, but at what point does it actually become an issue and something's maybe fundamentally wrong with the rehabilitation process we're doing or the medical department? Because in the last 4 games now, if you just in all, including the 2 friendlies as well, we've had 4 injuries in all those in each of. We've had an injury in each of the last 4 games. Loftus-Cheek before the World Cup at Newcastle in the first 5 minutes, off injured. Then we have Broja ACL in the friendly against Villa. We then have a reoccurrence of a knee injury for Fofana in that behind closed doors game against Brentford. He started that to try and build some minutes back into the tank after that injury layoff. He picks up a setback to that in that same injury. We then have Rhys James gets injured against Milan, and then in his comeback game, he has a setback. He re-injures that same area. At what point do we look at this and think this is a recurring pattern? This is not just bad luck. I mean, do you think there's something fundamentally wrong with the medical department, the rehab we're doing? Because it seems to me, it seems odd. I know you can look too deeply into these things, but it seems odd that we've had 2 players now, 3 of you include Kante as well, actually, that have suffered setbacks either during their rehab when they've tried to up it, or in their first game back, they suffered a reoccurrence of the same injury. That, for me, stops becoming bad luck and becomes perhaps a fundamental issue that we need to look at.
Well, it's an amalgamation of things, isn't it? The fixture demand has become greater over the years. We've never experienced, and I know a lot of these injuries happened before the World Cup, but we've never experienced a mid-season World Cup. And I think again, people are still arguing perhaps players coming back too soon and Premier League action starting too quickly after the World Cup, because you wouldn't have that in any normal situation. But then you counteract that with the technology should be much better. The expert advice should be much better as we're learning new things about medical advancements and rehab. You've got the best people in the business working at these football clubs, and I can't remember a time where we've had so many injuries to similar positions. I mean, you could maybe put it to management demand and the fact that we play a very intense style of football. I think that the way in which Rhys James plays as well doesn't help. He's very physical, will never kind of duck out of those 50-50s. A lot of demand is put on him in terms of his distance, his covering distances, recovery tackles. It's not an easy position where you're going to pick up a lot of injuries, but certainly something that has happened over the years for Chelsea. So you never know. This might be something that you've kind of brought up that might come to light in months to come about, that position. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, obviously, it's a massive blow because he's going to be out for, well, the statement at Chelsea says a month. But, I mean, let's be honest, that's probably going to be 5 to 6 weeks before he's actually back properly playing football again. It could be a month till he's actually back in full training. And then from there, you're looking at 5-6 weeks, really. So he's going to miss all of January. And it's a massive blow because, we've got 2 games against City coming up. We've got Liverpool coming up. We've got Fulham away. We've got tricky games coming up in a condensed period. And I know Azpilicueta has been a great servant and he can do a job, but as Chelsea, you do not want to be heading into this busy fixture list with just Azpilicueta as your right back, because what happens if he goes down? Then you've literally got no one. And that kind of, before I move on to the sort of the chase for a new right back, do you think it's a concern that for a club like ours and how much money we've spent on attacking players and whatnot, that our best player is a right back and we are so reliant on him to actually play well as a team? When he got injured initially, we won one game from when he got injured against Milan to the World Cup, and that was against Villa in the league. We won 1 league match with him injured. So, I mean, is it a concern how reliant we are on one player? Because for me, that is worrying that you take one player out the side, and admittedly a very good player, probably the best in the world in his position, but the team just looks totally different.
Yeah, and that's where we need to players at the top end of the pitch need to take responsibility in their duties as well. I think it's been a few years now where we've relied heavily in our system on the fullbacks, not just creating chances but taking them as well. They've been quite high scoring. You can go back to Alonso as well with his goal contribution before. Chilwell in the build up and the lead up to our Champions League victory. Some really important moments and goals there. It is a concern, but then Chelsea did address it. We did sign three defenders in the window in Koulibaly.
No right back though.
No right back. But then I don't know. I think teams always have a certain amount of players that are so crucial to the way they play. I still think Liverpool a couple of years ago don't lose that title if they didn't get Virgil and Trent injured for long lengthy spells. It's just it is one of those things, but again, I think that's where we need to find another way to play. It needs to stop where we're so reliant on just the fullbacks, particularly to create attacking chances. But I don't know. That's where I suppose that's where you've got to give Potter some sort of time to be able to embed his own identity into what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that kind of moves us forward now. That this latest setback, if Chelsea, by all accounts, kind of journalists that I've had on the channel and spoken to, is that the plan was to, go for a right back in the summer, but that's obviously having to be brought forward now to January because of this latest setback for Rhys James. I mean, yeah, there's one thing here saying that Chelsea plan to push for a new right back in the summer, but with the latest setback for Rhys James, the club have pushed forward these plans to January. Names being looked at include Masto Gusto at Lyon, Pedro Porro at Sporting Lisbon, and Josip Juranovic, the Croatian international, at Celtic. I mean, George, before we discuss those names, I guess the new right back is now essential in this window. We simply have to. We can't go through all of January and potentially longer with just Azpilicueta. He can't play every 3 days at his age.
No, we've been forced in this position. We're going to have to probably be very smart in this, because probably don't want to tie down someone really long term. It's going to be very difficult to source a player who's essentially coming in for an emergency fill-in for a specific window. And as soon as James is fit, they then almost become second, if not third tier behind Azpilicueta as well. So it's very, very difficult for Chelsea now. And people are obviously aware of our position as well. So we're probably going to get mugged a little bit in price. But we have to. I think it's absolutely essential that we have cover there. It would be very naive and careless to go into the remainder of our season with just the hope that James comes back in 4 weeks and is fully fit, because history tells us that he's probably again going to have some sort of an injury spell at some point.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, guys, big up everyone in the chat, by the way. I will get to these messages in the chat. I'll just quickly talk through this and then I'll get to your comments, guys. But yeah, keep firing. I mean, George, I look at it and I think, mate, I look back to the Jose Mourinho days when he first came in, and the squad that we built, where you had 2 top-class players in every position. I think you have to do that. And I hate it when people say, oh, we shouldn't sign so-and-so because once Rhys James is fit, then he's not going to play too much, or so-and-so is too good to be a backup. You look at it, Chelsea play 60-plus games a season. There's going to be, just on that basis alone, you're going to get more than your fair share of game time, plus rotation, plus the fact that Rhys James is, dare we say it, injury prone, and you're going to play a lot of games. So this idea that we shouldn't sign someone of top quality, I'm not saying get someone as good as Rhys James, because there's hardly any players like that, but someone who is very close to that level. The idea that we shouldn't do that is just an utter nonsense, because we almost need like another first choice player. We don't want someone just to come in as a backup. We need someone to come in as almost a first choice player. And the Mail reporting, and subsequently confirmed by Dharmesh at Sky Sports as well, is that I don't know how much you've seen of this lad. I saw him a bit in the World Cup. Admittedly, I don't really watch any Scottish football, so I've not seen a lot of him at Celtic. But by all accounts, he's been pretty good. Chelsea are ready to revive their interest in Celtic right back Josip Juranovic as they wait for news on the extent of Rhys James's latest injury setback. And Juranovic is potentially available for as little as £8 million. That's subsequently been confirmed by Sky as well. I mean, George, I don't expect, like myself, you've watched too much of Celtic, but did you see a lot of this lad at the World Cup? And what I saw of him at the World Cup, I thought he looked pretty decent. I mean, we've signed right backs before for £7-8 million in Azpilicueta, and it's turned out pretty well. We signed Gary Cahill for £7 million all those years back. I know the market's a bit different now, but do you think this would be a good piece of business to get done?
Yeah, I do. It's just, it's risk-free, isn't it? You're going in with a low fee to bring in the player. I think the player knows where they stand in terms of hierarchy. And this all comes down to Potter's ability to sell this player the project. And that's why the very best managers like Pep, like Jose, like Klopp are able to, accumulate such great squads, because they all buy into the same concept, and that's sold from the very top, from the management, and the ability to kind of say you're a valuable part to the team. As you mentioned, 60 games, you're going to get your opportunity. Doesn't matter who's in front of you, and everyone plays a huge role in the success of the club. So you can throw as much money as you like at it, but essentially you can still make very smart business decisions with players who aspire to make the first team, or may even realise that actually I'm never going to be a first team player, but I understand my role and I have an important role to play. And if they've got the right attitude and character, and Potter's able to sell them that dream, then it's very smart business. But that is where man management and the quality of the manager comes into play, because it's easy to give a manager 500 million and say, we'll go and buy two world-class players. I think that's quite easy. The real quality of a manager is to be able to find and resource and recruit these types of players that can come in and do a job for a very small fee, but ultimately be a really good asset to the squad.
Yeah, mate, I agree. I think this makes sense. We know that January is a notoriously really difficult window to do business in. The prices get driven up because selling clubs know that buyers are desperate. Yeah. Clubs that Chelsea go to looking for a right back know that Chelsea are desperate. So that's going to add a few more million onto the price tag because we've simply got to get someone. And, you know, someone like Juranovic, all right, might not be a big name and whatnot, but ultimately, you know, I think he's solid. I think he's a good player. He's done very well for Croatia in the World Cup. Yes, if he did come in, you know, the step up from the Scottish League to the Premier League is obviously huge. And there would be, you know, an element of, can he make that step up? You know, can he bed in? I think he's shown that he can play well on the world stage for Croatia. I think by all accounts, I do believe that he could definitely do a job for Chelsea. And, you know, it would represent a relatively risk-free signing, a low outlay, and someone that can do a very solid job. I mean, I look at it and I don't think there's that many other players out there that, you know, we could get in for that money that could do the same job. I mean, I know that the club looked at Denzel Dumfries at Inter Milan last summer, but, you know, that would be a fantastic signing to bring him in. You know, in a great World Cup, but ultimately, one, Inter aren't going to let him go in January, and two, he's got years on the contract and it would cost a lot of money to bring him out. And I don't think Chelsea are prepared to pay 40, 50 million quid for a right back. So I think Dumfries, whilst would be ideal, is probably not going to happen. So you look at it, and Juranovic, you think, is probably the best option that we've got in this January window. And I think it's one that if it's going to be 8 million quid, it could end up being more. Even if it ended up being 15, 20 million quid, I still think, yes, that's a lot of money. But in this day and age, in the market, that represents a bit of a bargain. But I think it's absolutely vital that we get someone in, a right back in, as quickly as possible. Like, ideally, it'd be great to get it done by the game against City next Thursday. Probably not going to happen. But if we can get someone in place for the following weekend against Crystal Palace, then I think that is an absolute must. And we've got to move quickly in the market. We've seen now that Chelsea are prepared to move quickly in the market, getting deals done for players like Fofana from Molde, the young striker, Andre Santos, the midfielder at Vasco da Gama. You know, moving quickly to get deals done. Chelsea do that. We've seen Liverpool come out of nowhere, just bang, Cody Gakpo done in an hour. You know, 37 million quid, all job done. You know, you've got to act quickly in this market. And I think Bowley and Co have shown that they are prepared to act quickly. And this is definitely another position where we have got to act quickly. I mean, mate, time is of the essence in the January window. Do you agree that we've got to literally wrap up a right back as quickly as possible? There's no point in getting to the last week of the window and then finding we got someone in.
No, it's going to be extremely difficult for Chelsea to get business that they want done at the price that they it just doesn't work out like that. People know that we're in short supply of a right back and in need of one. So the price is going to be inflated as we expect. But again, we're going to have to be smart about this. We're probably not going to get the ideal player that we want in January, but circumstances have changed. And like you said, you know, we're in a very difficult situation now in the league where we can't really afford to drop too many points. So we need certainly a replacement, and a suitable replacement, to come in and do a job quite quickly. So the sooner we can get that wrapped up and then get integrated into the side, the better.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. I mean, before I move on to the midfield situation, I'm just going to quickly talk about Benoit Badiashile, the Monaco centre-back. Now, that deal, I mean, that news kind of broke last week, seemingly not out of nowhere, because Chelsea had been on the Chelsea list for a while, but seemingly Gvardiol was like the main target. I'm not saying because Badiashile signed that Gvardiol's not going to happen, but I think it increases the likelihood that Gvardiol is probably not going to happen. Because Chelsea agreed on personal terms, but agreeing a fee with Leipzig is proving pretty difficult. And now that he's had a good World Cup, that's going to drive that fee up even more. You're looking at 80, 90 million pounds. I just don't think with the money we need to spend in midfield that we can afford to spend that much on a centre-back. So looking at Benoit Badiashile, the Monaco centre-half, 21 years of age, negotiations are progressing to the final stages for him to join Chelsea. Expectation for the deal to be completed for around 35, 40 million euros, so about 30, 35 million pounds. Agreement on personal terms with Badiashile. He's now keen on the move, as was reported yesterday. This was a few days ago now. Badiashile himself, I don't know an awful lot about him, but what I do know is that he's already made his France debut. He's 21 years of age, 2 caps. He's 6'4". He's a left-sided centre-back. Over 100 appearances already at club level. 21 years of age, as I said, fits that age profile of looking to build a squad of players under the age of 25, the majority. Chelsea need a left-sided centre-back because we've only got one of those at the moment. George, what are your thoughts on this, mate? I don't expect you to know too much about the player, but for me, I like this. 1, because it's a decent fee. 2, it's a player that has got very good potential. And we're actually planning for the future so that when Thiago Silva does eventually move on, when Koulibaly, I know he's only just got here, but he's 30, 31, when he eventually moves on, we've got someone that's would have already been at the club for 1 or 2 years, ready to step straight in. So I like the succession planning. I like the forward thinking. But what does surprise me is that having signed 2 centre-backs in the summer, we're getting a third in January. I mean, do you think it's necessary?
I do, because I think there's a few players in that back line still that are coming of that age. You only have to potentially next season Thiago Silva.
Well, he's 39 next season.
Yeah, and again, as much as he's unbelievable, and starts as many games as we can, we know that his playing expectancy is going to diminish pretty much month by month now. And we have to start planning for the future. I think it's good that we're holding to our recruitment policy and we're not panic buying, players that are ready to go, because Chelsea have been down that avenue. And let's be honest, a lot of times Chelsea have gone for that kind of prime, ready-made, established player. Hasn't worked out for us. And you only have to look at the recruitment that, maybe a Jurgen Klopp has made with kind of underrated signings that have been overlooked and have turned them into world beaters. And I think that excites me. That's a big positive. But again, because of Chelsea's management policy, are we going to give Graham Potter the chance to really embed the players he wants and be able to see it through the whole transition from signing for Chelsea to then 5-6 years down the line where they are an established player, and not just giving that to someone, a new manager who doesn't want them. I mean, that's where the difficulty is with Chelsea, as opposed to maybe the other clubs who have made great strides in the last couple of years. But I like the understated way about it now, because I think we've been down the avenue of big price signings, and it doesn't work for us.
Hardly any of them. Look at the money we spent over the years on so-called established players. We spent hundreds of millions of pounds on them, and hardly any of them worked out. Our best signings over the years have been players that have cost like 15 million or less.
Or homegrown.
Or homegrown. So this idea that, we shouldn't be signing these players because, no one's heard of them or they're not that well, renowned on the world stage. We've got to move away from that line of thinking. The whole point is, what we're trying to do now is find these players before they become 60, 70, 80 million pound players. So, for example, I'm not saying this will happen with Badiashile, but like if Chelsea don't sign Badiashile now and someone else signs him and then he develops how people expect him to, he's then suddenly a 50, 60 million pound centre back. And then you end up going and spending 3 times as much as you could have paid for him in the first place. So the whole point is, with this new recruitment structure, this new way of going around things, is that we cut out the middleman and we find these players before they end up being like 60, 70 million pound players, because you end up saving yourself so much money. So, and I think that's the way we've got to go about it. That's the smart way to recruit and do business these days. And for me, I look at it as win-win. You pay a low fee for a decent player and they turn out to be really good for you, or you pay a low fee, it doesn't quite work out, but they're still good enough to go and play for another top side, and you end up making a profit. So I look at it and it's win-win. And the recruitment strategy at Chelsea is something that's desperately needed to change for so many years, because part of the reason we're in this mess is because of how shit the recruitment's been for years and years under the previous regime. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, well, I do agree. I mean, we tend to buy players who are perhaps past their best. We're renowned for that, particularly in forward lines. I mean, even you look at Raheem Sterling, look, fantastic signing, don't get me wrong. Clearly still a very, very good footballer, but have we got Raheem Sterling perhaps towards the end of his career? Have we seen the best of Raheem Sterling at other clubs? You could probably argue yes with both questions. And then you look at players that perhaps have been very understated that have done really well for the club. Like you mentioned at the top of the show, Azpilicueta, no fee. Yes, people had heard of him, but I mean, if you were to tell me that he would be the most decorated Chelsea player in the club's history, I would have laughed. That I think there's been even Kovacic was, quite
40 mil, yeah.
Not really in favour. People were kind of questioning, is he the type of player? He's one of the best players.
Mate, to be honest, he's one of our best players, and even I question that move as well. I mean, you look at the season he had on loan; he was terrible. And I still think the only reason we made that move permanent was because of the transfer ban. Because there's no way that I don't think there's any way we would have made that move permanent if there wasn't a transfer ban. Because you look at that season-long loan and you think he didn't demonstrate anything really to suggest that he was going to be the player that he is, mate. He was kind of on a par with Ross Barkley, and like it is mad. But yeah, this Badiashile deal should be wrapped up pretty soon. I like it. I think it makes sense. I'm not claiming that I know loads about the player, but I trust that the guys have done their due diligence, the new scouting department, the new recruitment team and whatnot. Trust they've extensively looked at this guy, Lawrence Stewart, who came in from Monaco, who's part of kind of the global operations. He comes as a recommendation from him. He obviously knows the player very well. And I think it makes sense on a number of levels. So and that's bound to get done pretty quickly. So yeah, I like this move, and I don't see any issues with it whatsoever. Andre Santos, the young Brazilian, is that move is pretty much done. And also Chelsea, literally in the last sort of 10-15 minutes or so, officially announcing the transfer of Fofana from Molde to join the club for 12 million euros. I fully expect him to go out on loan. I think that's the plan. So yeah, things are getting done. But mate, let's move on to the exciting stuff, the midfield situation, guys. By the way, make sure you vote in the poll as well. I've got a poll going. Would you rather have Enzo Fernandez or Declan Rice if you can only have one? But let's start with Enzo Fernandez, mate. And things are heating up. Hopefully Todd Bowley's cooking something nice for us here. We desperately need it. Well, let me just quickly find it. Enzo Fernandez, obviously, what's mad is that he joined Benfica 6 months ago from South America. I think he was playing in Argentina. Joined Benfica. There's a 120 million euro release clause in there. That's kind of par for the course when you, particularly for Spain and Portugal, when you sign players from South America, there's always a release clause in the contract. I think it's a smart way of doing business because you ensure you get, the maximum amount of money. But he's had a very good World Cup. He's also played very well for Benfica this season, particularly impressive in their Champions League run so far as well, topping a group that contained PSG and Juventus. But Ben Jacobs providing an update on Enzo Fernandez. I mean, Duncan Castle, I think a journalist for the Times, reporting last night that Chelsea would be prepared to pay that 120 million euros release clause to bring Enzo Fernandez in January. Now, don't get me wrong, this guy is a top player, 21 years of age, had a really good World Cup. And Ben Jacobs saying that Chelsea are seriously exploring Enzo Fernandez, but Benfica don't really want to sell mid-season, especially with the fact they've got Champions League football. Paying the 120 mil release clause is the simplest approach, but Chelsea would rather offer more, as they did with Nkunku, and then define a more preferable payment structure. Told Fernandez is not desperate to exit in January. Benfica calm about situations. Suitors, seeing them as somewhat of a selling club, will be trying to convince them it's optimal time to cash in post-World Cup. Benfica could make 5 million from every game he's played since joining, so 24 games. But unless the release clause is met, resulting in a huge outlay up front, Benfica can control the situation, especially knowing Fernandez may well prefer a summer move. That's why Chelsea are basically doing due diligence for now. Liverpool, United and Real Madrid are fans too. Newcastle also one to watch. All clubs are trying to understand Fernandez's ambitions and work out whether rivals will genuinely move in January. Obviously, Liverpool and Real would only consider a summer swoop. Reports in Portugal that Liverpool have already bid 100 million wide of the mark, and a January exit remains complicated, especially with the World Cup when he yet to decide if a mid-season transfer is even what he wants. But no doubt Premier League interest is growing, even if it's still pretty formative. So a lot to unpack there, mate. First of all, thoughts on Enzo Fernandez. Again, admittedly, I didn't know an awful lot about him. He joined Benfica, and then you start hearing about him, when they were doing well in the Champions League, had a very good World Cup. There's no doubt at 21 years of age that he looks like he's going to be a very good player. My only concern with this potentially is one, it's a phenomenal amount of money to spend, 120 million euros, on a player who, despite how good he looks and how high his potential is and how good he potentially could go on and become, this guy's only played 6 months of football in Europe. 6 months ago, no one had heard of this guy. And he was playing in South America. Benfica signed him. And he's now at a point where his stocks are high. He's had a very good World Cup, and now everyone wants him. I mean, Chelsea need midfield players for sure. I wouldn't be against signing him, but I think for 120 million euros, for someone that's only played 6 months of football in Europe, I still think, and you can say, yes, every signing is a gamble. I just think it is still quite a big gamble, this, if Chelsea were to push through and go for it.
Yeah, he's reminds me a lot of a Bitcoin, a lot of hype. And everyone jumping on the bandwagon, but really no research or really any basis to go off it other than a great moment, a great trend of a good World Cup. which does concern me. We've done this before. I mean, Ziyech had a good World Cup, but how has he progressed to the Chelsea shirt? Not very well. I think for me, this is dangerous. I think we've got to come away from these big money signings with very little data to back up. And yes, of course, you'll maybe some do slip through the net and are unheard of and announce themselves at the scene and become great players. And he's got time on his side, absolutely no doubt about that, and his ability. But we've just been talking about being smart in the business, in the windows and looking for players in our recruitment and trying to make profit, but also looking long term. It's a huge gamble with the money we spent on previous so-called, in quotation marks, potential, Havertz, Werner, and the like. I mean, huge money signings that still haven't really worked out. For me, this is a difficult one, and I think we need to probably let it calm down and assess where we are as a club come the end of the season in terms of where we stand in the league, and also, whether he can back this up a little bit, because I think this noise will go away a little bit.
I mean, he's a phenomenal player, and I think if he continues on his form for Benfica for the rest of the season, he will definitely leave there in the summer. There's no two questions about it. But I look at it and I think, from a Chelsea perspective, yes, 105 million quid is a lot of money for sure. But I also look at it and I think I see Chelsea and Todd Boehly perhaps trying to be opportunistic here, knowing that in the summer, the chances of Chelsea getting Enzo Fernandez are probably a lot lower than they are right now. They might be looking at it and seeing, right, Enzo Fernandez's stocks are really high. Let's try and pay more than the release clause and then structure the payments in a more favourable way to suit us. And I look at it and think Chelsea could be trying to be smart here and and jump the queue in terms of, in the summer when you've got Enzo Fernandez and you've got a choice of pretty much any top European club you want to go to. And the fact that Chelsea, as things stands, probably aren't going to be playing Champions League football next season, that's going to be a huge factor in trying to get Fernandez. So I think that's why we're looking at this now. And I think Chelsea have obviously been monitoring the player, but I think that interest has now been accelerated, knowing that, he's had a good World Cup and he's going to be very interested in joining. So I think Chelsea are thinking that let's use this as an opportunity to try and jump the queue and get ahead and get this deal done. And for him to join, I mean, ideally it'd be for him to join now, but I think a best case scenario for all parties would be for Chelsea to agree a deal. He finishes the season at Benfica and he's ready to come in the summer. But I mean, mate, do you view this more as Chelsea being opportunistic in the market as well, knowing that actually if this goes to an auction in the summer, that if Fernandez has got a choice of, say, Chelsea, Liverpool, Real Madrid, PSG, other clubs, that as much as we love Chelsea and we like to think, every player wants to join us, the fact of the matter is that we're pretty close to the bottom of that list if he's got a list to pick from.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I completely understand why Chelsea have gone in now and registered their interest and the need to kind of push this forward if he does want to move. I just personally know from what all the journalists have said and what you're reading below that I think obviously Benfica are very reluctant to do it mid-season. They're obviously still involved in the Champions League. I think he's going to have more options as the season comes to a close, and they'll have more power the longer they wait. So it's going to be very difficult. But Chelsea, of course, are going to register their interest early on to kind of make him turn his head slightly and think, well, there's a big opportunity here. Should we cash in when he's at his peak, essentially, his peak interest and his peak performance? But for me, there's another player in that position that I would much rather have, and it's not him.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, ideally, I'd take both. I'd take Declan Rice and I'd take Enzo Fernandez. But again, that's a phenomenal amount of money. You're looking at almost over 200 million pounds nearly on two midfield players. We haven't got an endless pit of money. We'd have to sell players to make room for both of them. But I like you, I agree that if it was Fernandez or Rice, for me, it's Declan Rice. One, because we can get him for 70 or 80 million pounds. Two, he knows the Premier League inside out and he's Premier League proven. Plus, he's a Chelsea fan. He loves the club. He wants to play for it. I'm not saying if Fernandez came that he wouldn't want to play for us. Of course he would. But, he's not got that same affiliation or that same connection that Declan Rice would have. And I just think for the money that's being spent, I think Declan Rice can do just as good a job, if not potentially better job than Enzo Fernandez could do in that position. I just think if you're looking at doing smart business, Enzo Fernandez for 105 million or Declan Rice for 70 or 80 million, I think Declan Rice for that money makes more sense for those reasons. I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, mate, 100%. I know there's a little bit of an English bias, and you wanting to have the young English talent in your team because you're an English club, and I completely get that. But it's for all those things you just mentioned. He's Premier League proven. He's been fantastic for England. So if you're looking at international duty, is what we're looking at Fernandez here. Declan Rice is proven, established international player. I just think everything just ticks the box, doesn't it? He's good friends with players that are already at the club, fits right in. I think he's looking at the style of playing which we want to play, versatile. I don't think there's anyone at the moment in my mind who's in comparison with Declan Rice. I think for me it's one target, and we go for him full throttle if we can. And I know there's going to be a lot of competition for his signature, but surely this has to be his last year at West Ham, and surely
I think it is, yeah.
Surely Chelsea is going to be his preferable move. But again, it is all dependent on where we finish, which is why it is so difficult. And I can understand why Chelsea are trying to buy players now than the summer, because we don't know where we're going to be in the summer. Is Rice going to want to join a non-Champions League team? This is
the problem. I mean, Chelsea have seemingly got a free run at Declan Rice and have done for a long time. But you look at the players in the market and you think, right, the teams that are interested in Jude Bellingham and the teams that are interested in Enzo Fernandez, obviously only one team is going to get either of those players. So you then look at the teams that don't end up getting Fernandez or Bellingham are then going to probably put their eggs in a Declan Rice basket. And then it makes it a bit more of a race. And you think like, yes, okay, Declan Rice you think would be set on joining Chelsea. But if someone else came in and offered Champions League football, even if you looked at Manchester City, for example, you'd have to think that Rice would be very tempted, or he'd even be tempted to go to a Liverpool or something like that. There's no guarantees that, just because Chelsea seem to be the favourites and kind of front of the queue, as it were, have done a lot of the groundwork and would presume that Declan Rice wants to join, that if offers from Liverpool or City appeared on the table and we had no Champions League football next season, then there's every chance that he could potentially choose them as well.
Oh yeah, because I know he's obviously we know that he's a Chelsea fan and all the rest of it, but the end of the day, he's got to look after his own interests. And as much as there's a great affiliation with the club, he's got to be sensible and think, again, footballers' career is very short. Yeah, you can play for your club, but if you get offers from those clubs who are winning, pretty much dividing the trophies between them and playing for a manager like Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp, it makes it a lot harder. No disrespect to Graham Potter, but you look at those two managers and think my career could go on another level if I had signed for this team. You're almost guaranteed success in one way or another. So Chelsea are not in the same position as they were maybe 5-6 years ago, competing on all fronts. It's now more of a project. And does he want to take that gamble? It's difficult. Or we could sign an overweight Calvin Phillips. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think what there's a lot of hope in doing is that Chelsea have got to sell players the project and convince them that in the long term they're the right place to go, because realistically in the short term Chelsea probably isn't the best place to come. They've got to try and convince player of the pathway, of the opportunity, and of what's going to come in the next few years rather than the now. So I think it's convincing players that the project is good to buy into. And that there will be a clear pathway to success and where we're looking to go, rather than relying on, already being a ready-made successful team, Champions League football and whatnot. That's why I'm so pleased that we got the Nkunku deal done early, because we obviously convinced him that it's the right place to be. Because if that had gone to a bit of an auction in the summer, which it easily could have done, there's every chance that Nkunku doesn't pick Chelsea, because we don't have that Champions League football to offer. So the fact that he signed knowing that it could be Europa League football next season, that's a huge plus. It's a big plus. But Matt, I just want to quickly move on to the last couple of things to round out. Jorginho, apparently reports saying that Chelsea are reluctant to negotiate a new deal with Jorginho, which has put Newcastle on red hot alert, especially if a minimal fee could be agreed in January. Where do you stand on Jorginho? Because we've got to be careful here, because yes, we are going to have to get rid of players to balance the books, of course. You can't have all this outlay and not bring people in to bring some money into the club. But I look at it and I think, if I'm Chelsea and I'm looking at the midfield, I'm saying, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Conor Gallagher are probably two players that I'd be looking to sell before getting rid of Jorginho. Now, obviously, if Jorginho doesn't want to be at the club, that's a separate conversation. But I think Jorginho is one that is definitely worth keeping. I don't think there's many players in world football that have got his skill set and he can be a very valuable member of the squad as well. So I look at it and I think if I'm going to sell someone, I'd rather sell Loftus-Cheek and Gallagher. Imagine if you had like Rice or Fernandez or Rice and Fernandez with Jorginho as an option to rotate in between them. I think that's phenomenal squad depth. And it's important that you've got quality in depth. And I think Jorginho is someone that would perhaps be happy with that sort of role. So for me, if he wants to stay, he's 100% worth keeping about.
I don't know. I'm always 50-50 with Jorginho. Look, I think he's a great professional, very solid and consistent, and he has been a great servant to the club. But I think there's also an element of Chelsea being too safe with the option of Jorginho and thinking that he plays and we play this certain way. And I think sometimes you need to take risks. And I think I look at it and I see. Look, I'm not a fan of Conor Gallagher, by the way, but I think if you're looking at Potter's projects, you're probably thinking that he's going to be one who he keeps as a player that he wants to develop in his tenure.
Yeah.
Loftus-Cheek, again, he's got something about him, but I'd agree with Loftus-Cheek. Probably his time at Chelsea is perhaps maybe up and best suited elsewhere, despite being a great individual. But then I look and I think, Jorginho, sometimes as much as he's a great, solid, safe option, he also restricts us a lot in that midfield by the nature of his game. And I know we haven't even discussed Kante and perhaps the ability when he comes back that he could be on the market as well. Yes, we need to balance it with squad depth, but I think Chelsea do need to take risks in that area now. And for me, he's on the top of, if not the top player on my list, who I would think probably come away from it and sell him.
Would you? I don't think we're in a position to let him go in January though.
No, not in January. I'm not speaking in January. I mean,
so you think let him go on a free in the summer?
Well, I think sometimes players just naturally come to the end of their course.
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't want to be here, then that's fair. But I think if he does want to be here and we can't agree on a contract, I think that reflects badly on us.
What else do we really get out of Jorginho now at this stage in terms of progression? I don't know. I always see when his name's in the team sheet, good option, probably going to give you a 7 out of 10, but he's not going to be a world beater, and he's not. I don't know. I feel like there's something more that Chelsea can offer in that position to be a bit more risk taking, and we could, perhaps go for games a little bit more. It's almost like you say with the Southgate approach and the handbrake on. I just feel sometimes we're too protective in there. But I could regret to say that. I mean, he's one of those classic players, isn't he? That when he's missing, you see how much he does, and then actually.
I mean, if he goes to a team like Newcastle, for example, being reported, I'm not saying I mean, I think that's highly unlikely to happen in January, but never say never. If he goes to a team like Newcastle, he makes a phenomenal difference for them.
Oh yeah,
that's the difference. That if Newcastle sign Jorginho in January, that gets them top 4. Yeah. It's as.
And I mean, Pep wanted him before he joined Chelsea. That shows how highly regarded he is as a player. So,
mate, Newcastle get him. He gets them Champions League football. It's as simple as that. I mean, a midfield of Bruno Guimaraes, Jorginho, Joe Linton, or whatever is in there, Willock, Longstaff, or whatever. Mate, that gets you top 4. Just signing Jorginho would get Newcastle the top 4. So I think we need to be careful, but also we have to accept that. I don't care how good a player is. If they ultimately don't want to be at the football club, then they need to be moved on. And if that's the case with Jorginho, if he doesn't want to be here, he wants a new challenge. He's done so well for the club, then he deserves his opportunity to move on. That's for sure, mate. Just to round out, then, just very briefly, what were your thoughts on the game yesterday? I mean, it wasn't the greatest performance, but compared to what we've had this season so far, it's been some of the best football we've played in a long time, and that obviously is a very low bar. But I think for me, the most important thing was just to get the 3 points. I think right now, the points have got to be done over the performances for us, because yes, we had 2 good moments of quality, but again, Bournemouth had opportunities. We were a little bit sloppy at the back at times, and if Bournemouth just had a bit more cutting edge, a bit more quality, they could have easily beaten us.
Yeah, we were speaking pre-match, weren't we? We both said that this could be a really tricky game, and that actually I expected, Bournemouth to come and get something, especially a goal. I thought they would certainly get a goal. But we started completely by surprise, took me by surprise, started really, really well. I think you could see, even in the short space of time, what Potter's trying to do on the counter attack and the transitions and the decision making in the final third. Lots of early balls into the box, just direct form of play when we've got the ball. And you saw that with the first goal. An early ball into the box, Havertz on the end of it in the right area in the 6-yard box, which is what we need, a kind of poacher and players just to stick balls into the right areas. And then obviously in the second half, you saw the Chelsea of old and the recent form of perhaps being a little bit naive, giving away needless possession, allowing opportunities for the opposition, miscommunication sometimes. And he was questioned about that in the post-match press conference about a lot of fans still being unhappy about the performance levels. And he said, look, it's not perfect, but, he can appreciate and understand why fans are still a little bit upset. Because, you look at that second half and think that was, again, very boring to watch, took our foot off the gas. But look, like you mentioned, it was all about the points, really. You've got to start well, particularly with the terrible streak we were on. And we've got no room for error now if we're going to chase that top 4, particularly how, Spurs keep seeming to rescue points. Arsenal seems to be, on a different stratosphere at the moment. City, Liverpool consistently strong in areas. So it's going to be really, really tight. You look at Newcastle as well. Newcastle just seem to be
they're unreal,
ridiculous.
They're the best, other than Arsenal, they're best team in the league.
Yeah, so it's going to be harder
now
than ever for Chelsea to get that 4th spot this season. I really do believe that, and we're going to have to go on a serious run of games and topple some of those big 6 or big 8 teams.
Honestly, mate, I think it's going to require us to beat City at home and to beat Liverpool, and it's going to require us to beat Liverpool as well. Yeah, I think probably. if we're going to come top 4, I'm not saying the season hinges on it, but I think we're going to almost have to beat City next Thursday, and I think when we go to Anfield, I think we're going to have to win that game as well. If we lose one of those games or both of those games, which is very, very possible, you can forget the top 4. I think the top 4 does hinge on this month. It hinges on January. Like if we don't win those 2 games, I think we can forget the top 4. If we win one of those games, if we get 4 points from 6, it's very much still on. But I would probably say it's more important that we don't lose to Liverpool, because they're obviously more of a direct rival than City are, because let's be honest, we're not going to catch City for second place or top. But Liverpool, who are only a point ahead of us, they're a rival for that 4th spot. So for me, it's more important to win that game. But just quickly on the game itself, Mason Mount getting himself on the score sheet, and we saw him play in that number 8 kind of or free roaming 10 position, and he looks so much better there. I mean, that's got to be his position going forward now for the foreseeable.
Yeah, I'm so done with him being on that kind of right-hand side, being wasted, or I think he's so good in that area where he can just kind of drop into areas, into gaps. You saw him even just pull away on the edge of the box, first time finish, fantastic. Dictating the play, getting involved in the tackles and kind of redistributing the ball. He's just brilliant. And when he plays like that, we obviously, Mason Mount is one of the best young talents in the Premier League, but it's just, doing it, like we said, the constant, question mark is, can he do it on a consistent basis? I wouldn't be surprised if he's then completely anonymous against Man City. And I know it's difficult because they're such a dominant team with the ball and the players that they have, but you want Mount to do those sorts of games in the big ones that matter, not just against Bournemouth at home, where you could score. We could have easily been 5 or 6 in the first half. So look, fantastic performance. Still one of the first names on the team sheet for me, but I want to see him in that area.
In there, if it's a 4-3-3, one of those 8 positions, 100%. But if it's in the front line, absolutely not.
No.
Last guy I wanted to talk about, Kai Havertz. Everyone knows our thoughts on him, but in isolation, I thought yesterday's performance, he was pretty good. He was playing as a 9. Look, let's make no mistake about it. Yes, it was only Bournemouth. It wasn't the toughest game in the world. It was made quite easy for him at times, but I felt he was decent. It was promising from him, but again, we've seen moments of promise from Havertz before, and then he disappears for the next 5 or 6 games. So, I mean, do you think this could finally be the start of something new? I mean, I'm still not convinced. I still think that he's just going to be one of those moments, guys.
Yeah, I mean, he was so much better yesterday. Credit to him, like winning those aerial battles with the knock-ons, and he was a lot more intense. I mean, even off the ball, chasing down players, and obviously the goal itself, getting into the right position. That's just perfect. That's what you want as a so-called whatever he's playing in that front line. But again, this could be we could be looking at City on Thursday and he just barely gets a touch of the ball. And that, for a player that's been asked to do so much potential about him and so much promise. Again, you need to see that in the big moments. And he's come up with them before, but it's like you said, mate. He's been labelled, and rightly so, as a moments player, where he might come up with a massive goal, but then goes missing for the rest of the season. And it's just, I don't know. He's got to be close to the top goal scorer now for Chelsea this season.
Oh mate, it wouldn't be hard, would it? I think Sterling's. No, I think the top scorer in the league is Sterling with 3.
Yeah, that is shit. To be fair,
it's so shit. It's it's poor.
Look, at the moment we've got no other option, and he's
it's better option than Aubameyang for sure.
Oh, Aubameyang was absolutely useless when he came on.
I didn't even notice him, mate.
He doesn't even challenge for anything. He's just he's a waste of space, mate. It's another washed up, player that we again. That
was a big mistake, I think, that one, because that didn't make sense to me at all, because that was if Tuchel wasn't in charge, we never go for Aubameyang, and yet they sign him knowing they're going to sack. They sacked Tuchel the very game after that. So Badiashile played one game under Tuchel, and then Tuchel was sacked. The owners would have known that they were sacking Tuchel after that game. So why did they sanction that signing? That's the one thing that was I think the ownership have done great stuff since they come in. They've had so much work to do. I really like the things that they've done. That didn't make any sense at all.
That's just the one sticking point, isn't it? That he brought him in. He was clearly a Tuchel signing, and then all of a sudden, Tuchel's gone within 24 hours of him being signed, and it's just now Potter's been left with him, and he kind of got
with someone he doesn't want. Potter's never signing. We haven't got anyone else to choose from. I mean, one guy, mate, that could have an important role to play. Dennis Zakaria with a surprise start yesterday. I actually thought he was really good
yesterday. Yeah.
I thought he was good. He offered that kind of a strength and steeliness in the midfield that we haven't really had. I think in the games that he has played, I remember at home against Dynamo Zagreb, he scored on his debut. He was very good. I thought he was half decent in that League Cup game at City as well. And then, I thought he was good against Bournemouth today. I mean, I think he deserves more opportunities. Considering how light we are in midfield anyway, he should be playing a lot more minutes than he has done. And I was impressed by him yesterday. He deserves more starts. I'd be tempted to play him against Forest on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I thought he was good yesterday. I thought he wanted the ball. He made options. He made it clear that he wanted to get involved. And we were all saying weeks ago, where is this player? What is he ever going to get a appearance for Chelsea? And then all of a sudden he gets a few, and I think he's got a goal for Chelsea already.
Yep.
Played really well yesterday. I thought he played really well. So again, he could be an unsung hero who just has a part to play somewhat for Potter's evolution and the way he wants to play. And I expect more chances on the base of that performance alone. I think he should get a start. I don't see why not.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that seems like a pretty good place to round out. I don't think any more Chelsea news has come in, but it's certainly going to be a busy time on the news front. January window coming up, games coming thick and fast. This could be the last video of the year. I'm trying to think if there's. It could well be the last video of the year. I'm trying to think. Obviously, if we play Forest on Sunday, I'm going to be joined on Saturday. It won't be the last video of the year. Be joined by the guys from Forest Fan TV on Saturday evening for a preview for the Nottingham Forest game. So make sure you tune in for that one. There could be a video before then. Depends if anything major happens or there's any major developments. But if not, guys, make sure you tune in Saturday night. Forest Fan TV joining the channel for a preview for Sunday's game. Thanks so much for getting involved in the chat. As always, on your way out, please make sure you smash the likes and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Mate, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it as always. Guys, we'll catch you again on Saturday, maybe before, depending if anything happens. As always, keep the faith and up the Chels.